The morning sun glinted off the wing of Flight 1876 as it cut through the clouds toward Washington, D.C. Inside the cabin, most passengers had settled into that particular hush that falls in the final hour of travel. Headphones in seats reclined, minds already at their destinations. Not William Morgan. In seat 3A, his fingers moved rapidly across his laptop, refining projections that would determine the fate of $8 billion by morning. The blue light of the screen reflected in his steel-rimmed glasses, casting shadows beneath eyes that hadn't known proper rest in years. He didn't notice the small figure standing in the aisle beside him, not until a slight pressure touched his elbow. William turned, expecting a flight attendant, perhaps offering another coffee he didn't need. Instead, a child, a girl of perhaps 7, stood watching him with unnervingly steady eyes. She clutched a worn teddy bear missing one button eye, its fur rubbed thin from years of comfort. Her socks didn't match, one striped blue, one solid yellow. Her dark curls framed a serious face that seemed to carry a question too important for small talk. William's fingers froze over the keyboard. Something in her directness felt familiar in a way that tugged at a locked door inside him. "I need to finish this presentation," he thought. "The meeting is in 4 hours." The girl's voice came soft but clear above the drone of engines. "Sir, would you pretend to be my dad just for one day?" The question sliced through everything. The ambient noise, the financial models on his screen, the carefully constructed walls around certain memories. William's throat tightened. Behind the girl, a woman appeared, moving quickly down the aisle, her hospital scrubs wrinkled from what looked like a double shift. Her face carried the same bone structure as the child's, but with the weathered edges of someone who had faced more storms than fair skies. "I'm so sorry," she said, kneeling beside the girl. "She doesn't usually—" "Hannah, we don't bother strangers. I'm not talking to a stranger," Hannah replied, eyes still fixed on William. "He looks like he might say yes." William blinked once, twice, trying to recalibrate. The woman, clearly the mother, stood gently guiding her daughter's hand. Her voice carried the practiced tone of someone accustomed to smoothing over difficult moments. "We didn't mean to disturb you. She's just excited about tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" William heard himself ask, though part of him screamed to turn back to the safety of spreadsheets and projections. The woman hesitated, exhaustion evident in the slight slump of her shoulders. "Daddy Day at school. Everyone brings theirs." Hannah took a step closer, the bear clutched tighter to her chest. "I don't have one, but you look like you might understand." A flight attendant paused nearby, pretending to check overhead bins while openly listening. The mother's cheeks flushed, her voice lowered. "We'll leave you alone. Thank you for your patience." But William heard himself ask what time. The mother, Claire, according to her hospital badge, blinked in surprise. 10 o'clock, Washington Heights Elementary. William nodded, closing his laptop. Not because he'd finished, but because something more important had suddenly appeared. "I'll be there." Hannah's face remained serious, but something lightened in her eyes. "Just for one day," she repeated, as if setting the terms of a contract. The plane dipped slightly as it aligned with the runway, the seatbelt sign chiming. As Claire led Hannah back to their seats, William caught the flash of a medical alert bracelet on the girl's thin wrist. He made a mental note to look up what it might indicate, then immediately questioned why he cared. Just for one day, he thought. One day to play a role he'd failed at in real life. The penthouse, overlooking Georgetown, glowed with the blue light of multiple screens. William stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights spread below like a circuit board of human connection. 3 monitors displayed real-time data from Nexus Technologies' latest AI prototype: sentiment analysis, emotional response rates, user engagement metrics. The numbers should have commanded his full attention. Instead, he kept replaying the moment on the plane. "Could you pretend to be my dad just for one day?" Not a plea, a proposition, as if she'd assessed him and determined he might meet the specifications for a temporary father. The directness unsettled him precisely because it felt honest. William moved to his computer and typed "Washington Heights Elementary Parent Day" into the search bar. There it was, 10:00 a.m., classroom 2B. Guests welcome. His finger hovered above the keyboard, tempted to close the window and return to work. The board meeting was in 2 days. The presentation needed finalization. The quarterly projections needed adjustment. Instead, he opened another tab and searched "Child Medical Alert Bracelet Red." Several possibilities appeared: allergies, diabetes, rare blood types. One caught his eye: selective mutism, an anxiety disorder where a child is unable to speak in certain social situations, often speaks normally at home, but remains silent at school or other public settings. William leaned back in his chair, remembering how clearly and directly Hannah had spoken to him on the plane. If she had selective mutism, why had she approached a complete stranger? The question nagged at him as he walked toward the bedroom. He paused at the door to what had once been his home office and was now simply a room he avoided. The door remained perpetually closed, preserving what lay inside like a time capsule of grief. Tonight, something pulled him forward. The handle turned easily under his palm, the hinges silent despite disuse. Inside, everything remained as it had been 5 years ago. A child's desk against the wall, model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, a bookshelf filled with science encyclopedias and adventure stories. On the desk, a small silver frame held a photograph: a younger William with a boy of 6, both laughing as they flew a kite on a windy beach. Michael's science fair medal hung from the corner of the frame, the blue ribbon faded, but the gold still catching what little light entered the room. William's throat tightened as he picked up the medal. Michael had won it for his volcano project in first grade, the same day William had promised to attend the next science presentation. A promise broken by a drunk driver who ran a red light 2 weeks later, taking both Michael and his mother, Kate, while William attended an unmissable board meeting. From his pocket, William's phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Chen, head of Nexus's board of directors: final numbers for the Meridian acquisition markets opening in 6 hours. Team needs direction. William placed the medal beside his computer monitor and returned to work, the two symbols of his life, past and present, now sharing the same space for the first time in years. The morning arrived with the particular crispness of early autumn. William selected a navy sweater instead of his usual suit jacket, still tailored and expensive, but softer than his typical corporate armor. The receptionist at Washington Heights Elementary looked up as he approached the front desk, blinking twice at the unexpected presence of one of the country's most recognizable tech executives in her school lobby. "Can I help you?" Her tone suggested she was already mentally composing the social media post about this encounter. "I'm here for Daddy Day, classroom 2B. The woman narrowed her eyes slightly. "And you are?" William hesitated, the question unexpectedly complex. "I'm filling in for Hannah Parker. She invited me. Sometimes the most important roles find us when we're not looking for them." The receptionist's skepticism softened into curiosity. She handed him a visitor sticker and a paper map with classroom 2B circled in red marker. Down the hall, third door on the left. William followed the sounds of laughter and muffled conversation. Classroom 2B already bustled with activity, fathers kneeling beside small desks, helping with coloring sheets, attempting to fold origami animals with varying degrees of success. The room exploded with primary colors, alphabet posters, children's artwork, a reading corner with plush pillows. So different from the minimalist chrome and glass of his corporate world. He paused at the threshold, suddenly aware of how out of place he must appear. And then across the room, Hannah saw him. Unlike the other children who waved excitedly or called out to their guests, she made no sound. She simply walked straight to him, took his hand, and pulled him inside. The small gesture of trust tightened something in his chest. The teacher, a woman in her 30s with a sunflower-patterned dress and kind eyes, approached with a warm smile. "Welcome, Mr. Morgan. Hannah mentioned you might be joining us today. I'm Ms. Abernathy." William nodded, noticing the curious glances from other parents who clearly recognized him. Hannah's grip on his hand tightened slightly. "You're right on time for our first activity," Ms. Abernathy continued. "We're making family trees." Hannah led William to a small desk adorned with her name in colorful letters. A blank poster board waited alongside markers, glue sticks, and construction paper cutouts of leaves and branches. William sat awkwardly in the child-sized chair beside her, his knees nearly touching his chest. Hannah worked methodically, selecting green construction paper for the tree trunk. She pointed to different spaces on the page, then to specific colored markers communicating her vision without words. William followed her silent instructions, cutting out shapes, passing materials, occasionally suggesting a placement that earned either a nod of approval or a decisive shake of the head. Around them, other father-child pairs chatted animatedly, their conversations filling the room with a comfortable buzz. The contrast made Hannah's silence more noticeable, yet there was nothing uncomfortable in the way she worked. Her focus reminded William of his best engineers, precise, determined, communicating exactly what was necessary and nothing more. As they completed the tree, Hannah carefully placed two leaves at the top, one labeled Mom in purple marker, the other blank. She stared at the empty leaf for a long moment, then picked up a blue marker and wrote, Uso, Morgan today, and in careful, deliberate letters. At the Play-Doh station that followed, Hannah molded three small figures, a girl, a woman, and a tall man with glasses. She arranged them in a tight circle, then looked up at William, waiting for his response. The simplicity of the gesture, creating a family unit where he was included, sent an unexpected pang through his chest. Later, as the children gathered on a colorful rug for story time, Miss Abernathy asked, "Would any of our guests like to read today?" Before William could respond, Hannah raised her hand, the first voluntary gesture he'd seen her make in the classroom. "This is my dad," she announced, her voice clear but quiet. "Just for today." The room stilled. A few children whispered. Another father raised an eyebrow. William felt a flush creep up his neck as Hannah handed him a book and with a well-worn cover titled, My Family is Magic. He took it with both hands, settled cross-legged on the rug beside her, and opened to the first page. His voice emerged stiff at first, corporate and careful. But as the pages turned, each depicting different kinds of families finding each other through various magical circumstances, something inside him began to loosen. By the final page, where a child discovered that families are made by love, not magic after all, Hannah had rested her head against his shoulder. "I like when families find each other," she whispered so softly he almost missed it. William looked down at her and realized with sudden clarity that neither of them was pretending anymore. As the school day ended, parents and children filtered out of the classroom with promises of ice cream and park visits. William stood awkwardly by Hannah's desk as she carefully packed her backpack. Ms. Abernathy approached, her expression thoughtful. "It was wonderful having you today, Mr. Morgan. Hannah has never participated this actively before." William nodded, unsure how to respond to the implied question in her statement. Hannah approached, backpack secured, and slipped her small hand into his. "I should get her home," he said. "Her mother?" Ms. Abernathy smiled. "Of course. But perhaps you'd consider joining us for other special days. Hannah seems comfortable with you." As they walked through the parking lot, William realized he had no idea where Hannah lived or how she usually got home. The practicalities of the situation suddenly felt overwhelming. "How do you usually get home?" he asked, stopping beside his sleek black Audi. Hannah pointed to a yellow bus idling near the school entrance, then looked up at him expectantly. "Would you like me to drive you home instead?" William found himself offering, immediately questioning the propriety of the suggestion. Hannah nodded, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook. She opened it to a page with an address neatly printed in what looked like an adult's handwriting, alongside a phone number labeled Mom Emergency Only. The drive took them from the well-maintained streets near the school to a modest apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood across town. Hannah directed him with occasional pointed fingers and nods, navigating them through unfamiliar streets until they reached a beige three-story building with a small playground visible behind it. William parked and walked Hannah to the entrance. "Is your mother home?" Hannah shook her head and pointed to a sign on the door about after-school programs. A woman in a bright blue t-shirt waved from inside. William recognized the apartment complex's daycare facility, where Hannah apparently spent afternoons while her mother worked. "So I'll just—" William began, suddenly uncertain how to conclude this unusual day. Hannah looked up at him, her expression serious again. "Thank you for being my dad today." The simple gratitude hit with unexpected force. Before he could respond appropriately, Hannah had turned and walked toward the daycare entrance, her backpack bouncing slightly with each step. She didn't look back. A month passed. William buried himself in work, successfully closing the Meridian acquisition and adding several billion to Nexus Technologies' market value. He attended board meetings, gave interviews to technology publications, and approved new research initiatives with his customary precision and focus. Yet something had shifted. The photograph of Michael now sat prominently on his desk rather than hidden away in the closed room. Occasionally, he found himself wondering about Hannah, whether she was speaking more at school, whether her mother had found a better work-life balance, whether anyone else had been recruited to play temporary father. On a Tuesday morning, William surprised his executive assistant by canceling his standing leadership meeting. Instead, he drove across town to Georgetown University, where Dr. Rebecca Chen, a leading child psychologist specializing in selective mutism, had agreed to meet him on short notice. Her office contrasted sharply with William's minimalist workspace walls lined with children's artwork, comfortable furniture in warm colors and shelves filled with toys designed for therapeutic play. Dr. Chen herself, a woman in her 40s, with a practical bob and intelligent eyes, watched William with open curiosity as he explained his interest in selective mutism. "So this is for a new AI project?" she asked, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely convinced by his explanation. William nodded, maintaining the pretense. "Nexus is developing communication tools for children with verbal challenges. Understanding the psychological underpinnings will help us create more effective interfaces." Chen leaned back in her chair. "Selective mutism is fascinating because it's not about inability, but anxiety. These children can speak often quite well in comfortable settings, but the anxiety of certain social situations creates a physical block. Imagine your throat closing, your voice simply unavailable, no matter how desperately you want to use it." William thought of Hannah's clear, direct questions on the airplane contrasted with her silence at school. It must be isolating. Profoundly, Dr. Chen agreed. "What's interesting is that children with selective mutism often develop alternate communication strategies. Notes, gestures, expressions. They're frequently highly intelligent and observant. They're listening and processing everything, just unable to respond verbally." William remembered Hannah's precise gestures, her meaningful looks, the way she communicated exactly what she needed without words. "And treatment?" he asked. Dr. Chen smiled. "Gradual exposure therapy works best. Creating safe spaces with trusted people where speaking feels possible. Slowly expanding those spaces and that circle of trust. Progress can be remarkable once that foundation is established." As their meeting concluded, Dr. Chen paused at the door. "Mr. Morgan's selective mutism is a highly specific interest for an AI company. Is there something more personal motivating this research?" William hesitated, then found himself saying words he hadn't planned. "I couldn't save my son. Maybe I can help someone else's daughter." The admission hung in the air between them. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, understanding, flooding her expression. "Sometimes the deepest wounds create the strongest bridges to others," she said quietly. "If you'd like to discuss this further, not as a CEO, but as someone who cares about a child, my door is open." Returning to his office, William noticed the grandfather clock in the corner, a family heirloom he'd brought from home after the accident, but never paid much attention to. It had stopped working precisely at 2:17, the time of the crash that took Michael and Kate. For 5 years, he'd left it that way, a silent monument to frozen time. Today, he found himself lifting the phone. "This is William Morgan. I need the contact information for a reputable clock repair specialist." As he hung up, his assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Mr. Chen from the board is here to see you. He seems concerned about something." Thomas Chen entered without waiting for a response, a tablet in his hand displaying a news website. "Have you seen this?" he asked without preamble, turning the screen toward William. The headline read, "Tech Titan William Morgan plays dad at local elementary, new romance or PR move." Below it was a blurry photo clearly taken in Hannah's classroom, showing William reading to her. "You've been distracted for weeks," Thomas continued. "The board is concerned. First the rescheduled meetings, now this. What's going on?" William's jaw tightened. "My personal life is not board business, Thomas. It is when it affects the company. You're the face of Nexus. The Meridian deal nearly slipped through our fingers because you were missing deliverables." Thomas's voice softened slightly. "Look, we all understand you've been through hell, but this, whatever this is, it's raising questions. I'll handle it." William said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. After Thomas left, William stared at the article for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone again and dialed the number from Hannah's emergency notebook. Claire Parker's voice answered, breathless and hurried. "Hello, this is William Morgan. From the plane. From Daddy Day." A pause, then Mr. Morgan. "This is unexpected. I apologize for calling your emergency number. I wanted to check on Hannah. And to warn you, there's a photo of us in the news." Claire's sharp intake of breath was audible. A photo of Hannah. Her voice tense with maternal protectiveness. "It's not a clear image, but I thought you should know. Thank you." The wariness in Claire's voice was unmistakable. "Is that the only reason you called?" William hesitated. I've been researching selective mutism. I noticed Hannah's medical bracelet. I thought perhaps I could help. The silence stretched long enough that William wondered if Claire had hung up. Finally, she spoke again. Why would you want to help? William closed his eyes, seeing Michael's face behind his eyelids. I have resources that might be useful. Access to specialists. I've been speaking with Dr. Rebecca Chen at Georgetown. Another long pause. I appreciate the thought, Mr. Morgan. But Hannah isn't a charity case. I never suggested she was. William kept his voice even, despite the defensiveness rising in his chest. Then what is she to you? A project? A distraction? Claire's exhaustion bled through her professional demeanor. She's had enough people step into her life temporarily. I won't let her be disappointed again. The accusation stung with its accuracy. William had no answer that wouldn't sound hollow or self-serving. You're right to be cautious, he finally said. I don't have an agenda here, but if you change your mind, the offer stands. After hanging up, William turned back to his computer, trying to focus on work. Instead, he found himself researching Memorial Medical Center's pediatric department, where Claire's badge indicated she worked. The following afternoon, William walked through the automatic glass doors of Memorial Medical Center. He told himself he was there to learn more about children's communication challenges for his AI project. The alibi was plausible enough. Nexus Technologies had recently announced a new initiative focused on accessibility tools. His assistant had scheduled an official tour with the hospital's innovation director. The pediatric wing bustled with activity, nurses moving efficiently between rooms, doctors consulting charts, parents sitting anxiously in waiting areas. William followed the innovation director through departments, nodding at appropriate intervals while his eyes scanned for Claire. He spotted her near the nurse's station in the recovery unit. She stood with her back to him, hair pulled into a practical knot, her posture showing the fatigue of someone 5 hours into a shift. She turned at the sound of the tour group approaching and nearly dropped the chart in her hands. Mr. Morgan, she said, surprise evident in her voice. You're here. William nodded, maintaining professional distance. We're exploring potential applications for our communication technology. Your innovation director was kind enough to arrange a tour. Claire's expression shifted between suspicion and curiosity. Right, and that required the CEO's personal attention. The innovation director clearly thrilled to have such a high-profile visitor intervene. Ms. Parker, perhaps you could show Mr. Morgan the pediatric communication board your department developed. It aligns perfectly with his interests. Claire's professional mask slipped into place. Of course. This way, Mr. Morgan. She led him to a quieter corner of the unit where a colorful board displayed symbols for pain levels, basic needs, and emotions. Children who struggle with verbal communication, whether from selective mutism intubation or developmental challenges, can point to express their needs, Claire explained, in her voice taking on the practiced tone of someone who had given this explanation many times. We found it particularly effective for reducing anxiety around medical procedures. William studied the board with genuine interest. Have you considered digital adaptations? Before Claire could answer, a soft voice called from the hallway. Mr. Morgan. They both turned. Hannah stood at the end of the corridor holding her teddy bear, her mismatched socks visible beneath hospital-issued slippers. Her eyes were wide with surprise, but not fear. Claire's breath caught audibly. Hannah, you should be in the playroom. Why are you? But Hannah was already walking toward William, her steps deliberate and unhesitating. When she reached him, she looked up with the same direct gaze from the airplane. You came back. William knelt to meet her eye level, acutely aware of Claire's stunned expression. I did. Hannah reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully, revealing a drawing of 3 stick figures standing in front of a simple house. Above them, written in bright orange crayon, home for a little while. William studied the drawing, then looked at Hannah. Her eyes remained calm, steady, expectant. Behind them, a nurse whispered to Claire, maybe because he listened. The moment stretched between them, a child who rarely spoke, a man who rarely listened, somehow finding a bridge neither could quite explain. Over the next 3 months, William found himself drawn into the orbit of Hannah and Claire's life. It began with weekly visits, a dinner here, a Sunday afternoon at the museum there. Hannah's selective mutism showed remarkable improvement in his presence. After the 6th visit, Claire reluctantly accepted his offer to help research specialists, leading to a new therapy program at Georgetown. William discovered parts of himself, long dormant patience, while helping Hannah with homework creativity during art projects. Gentle strength when nightmares woke her during a movie night that ran late. Claire initially maintained careful boundaries, her protective instincts visible in the way she watched their interactions. But as weeks passed, those boundaries softened. William found himself noticing details about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, when thinking how her exhaustion never diminished her attentiveness to Hannah, the rare but transformative quality of her genuine laugh. Autumn deepened into winter. Rain gave way to the first snow blanketing Washington in pristine white that reflected the holiday lights appearing across the city. William introduced Hannah to the Phillips collection, where she stood transfixed before Renoir's Luncheon of the Boating Party, studying the expressions of each figure with intense concentration. He took them both to a performance of The Nutcracker, where Hannah squeezed his hand during the battle scene, her eyes wide with concern until the music softened. William's executive team noticed the changes, meetings rescheduled around school events, afternoons blocked off for therapy appointments, a new warmth in his typically clinical approach to product development. The AI communication project gained in momentum, fueled by William's first-hand observations of Hannah's progress. Dr. Chen became a formal consultant, helping the team understand the psychological dimensions of verbal challenges. The grandfather clock in William's office began keeping perfect time again, its steady tick marking seconds that no longer felt wasted. Michael's photograph remained on his desk, but now it was joined by a framed drawing from Hannah, her three stick figures, standing under a bright sun. As December arrived, Hannah's school held a winter concert. William sat beside Claire in the audience, watching Hannah stand with her class on risers decorated with paper snowflakes. When the music began, Hannah remained silent while others sang, but her lips moved slightly, mouthing words she couldn't yet voice publicly. Afterwards, she beamed with quiet pride as William praised her participation. That night, as they walked through the school parking lot, snowflakes catching in their hair, Claire's professional reserve finally cracked. "She hasn't been this happy in years," she admitted quietly. "Whatever your reasons for being here, I'm grateful." William looked at her snowflakes melting on her eyelashes, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I don't have an agenda, Claire. I'm here because I want to be." The admission hung between them, more honest than he'd intended. For a moment, something shifted in Claire's expression, a softening, a consideration of possibilities neither had acknowledged. Then Hannah tugged at both their hands, pointing excitedly at a holiday display in a nearby window, and the moment passed. Yet something had changed. In the weeks that followed, Claire began sharing more stories of her nursing school days. The challenges of raising Hannah alone, dreams deferred, but not abandoned. William found himself reciprocating with truths he rarely voiced: the emptiness of success without family regrets, about time wasted with Michael, the isolation of grief that had become his constant companion. As Christmas approached, William invited them to the Kennedy Center for a holiday performance. The three of them sat together in the velvet seats, Hannah between them, her eyes wide at the grandeur of the concert hall. When the orchestra began playing Silent Night, Hannah unexpectedly leaned against William's arm, her small weight trusting and comfortable. That weekend, William helped Claire and Hannah select a Christmas tree for their apartment, the first real one they'd had in years, Claire confessed. The scent of pine filled the small living space as they decorated with a mix of handmade ornaments and simple glass balls William had brought as a gift. Hannah carefully placed a paper star she'd made at school at the very top, standing on a chair William steadied with firm hands. The domesticity of these moments created an unfamiliar ache in William's chest, not the sharp pain of grief, but something gentler, a recognition of what he'd been missing. When Hannah fell asleep that night on the couch, exhausted from the excitement, Claire and William sat in comfortable silence, watching the colored lights reflect off the window. "You never talk about your son," Claire said finally, her voice soft in the dim light. William's body tensed involuntarily. "Michael," he said, the name still difficult to speak aloud. "He was 6 when it happened." Claire didn't press, simply waited, offering the space for him to continue or retreat. William found himself wanting to bridge the gap between them, to explain the gravitational pull he felt toward Hannah and increasingly toward Claire herself. "He was supposed to present his science projects that day," William said finally. "A volcano, there was baking soda everywhere the night before. I promised we'd clean it up after school." Claire's eyes held understanding without pity. "You had a meeting." William nodded, the familiar guilt settling like a stone. "I told him I'd make the next one. The accident happened 2 blocks from the school. A drunk driver ran a red light. Claire moved closer on the couch, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. You didn't choose to be too late, William. His throat tightened. I chose work. I chose distance. I thought keeping busy would protect me from feeling too much. When Hannah whispered, "Don't leave me too," during her fever, it broke something in me. I realized I've spent every day since the accident trying not to feel anything at all. The admission hung between them, more vulnerable than any he'd allowed himself in years. Claire didn't offer platitudes or easy comfort. Instead, she simply placed her hand over his warm and solid and real. "You can't replace what was lost," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean you can't show up for what's still here." William looked toward Hannah, peaceful in sleep, then back to Claire. Her eyes held no judgment, only a steady invitation to possibility. For the first time in 5 years, William allowed himself to imagine a future that contained more than the hollow success he'd built around his grief. The moment was interrupted by William's phone buzzing insistently. Claire withdrew her hand as he checked the screen. Thomas Chen's name flashed with an urgent message. "Calling emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Situation developing with Hannah Parker's story. Media spinning out of control. Need to discuss damage control." William's jaw tightened as he turned off the phone without responding. Tomorrow's problems. Tonight, in the glow of Christmas lights, with Hannah sleeping peacefully and Claire's understanding still warm beside him, he would allow himself this moment of peace. The peace wouldn't last. At 11:37 that night, as William drove back to his penthouse through gently falling snow, Claire called. Her voice cracked with strain and fear that instantly set his pulse racing. "Hannah has a fever," she said, without preamble. "It's high, William. 104 and climbing. I've tried everything. She keeps asking for you." William was already turning the car around, heading back toward their apartment. "I'm on my way." The night that followed would alter the trajectory of all their lives. Hannah's small body burned with fever, her normally placid face flushed and pained. Claire moved with the efficiency of a medical professional, administering fever reducers, applying cool compresses, monitoring vital signs. But beneath her clinical actions, fear shimmered visibly, the terror unique to parents watching their child suffer. William stepped into the apartment without knocking, having broken several traffic laws to arrive within 15 minutes. Hannah stirred at the sound of the door, her eyes opening to narrow slits. "Mason," she whimpered, voice raw from crying. He knelt beside the couch where she lay bundled in blankets, despite the heat radiating from her skin. "I'm here," he said quietly, brushing damp hair from her forehead. Her fingers found his small and burning and desperate. "Don't leave me too." She whispered, the words slipping out between labored breaths. The simple plea cracked something fundamental in William's carefully constructed defenses. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, the words emerging with an intensity that surprised even him. "I promise." For the next 6 hours, he didn't move from Hannah's side. He sat beside her, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring reassurances when fever dreams made her whimper, holding her hand when pain medications made her dizzy. Claire worked alongside him, their movements falling into a natural rhythm of shared purpose. At 3:17 a.m., the exact time that had frozen on his grandfather clock for 5 years, Hannah stirred again, her eyes opening with glassy confusion. Her lower lip trembled as she looked up at William. "Don't leave me too," she repeated, voice barely audible. Like he did. William's chest constricted painfully. He understood without asking who he was. He leaned forward gently, gathering Hannah's small form into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if holding something infinitely precious and fragile. "No," he said, his voice breaking on the simple word. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Hannah buried her face against him, her tears hot against his shirt. For the first time all night, her trembling began to ease. Dawn broke slowly, pale winter light filtering through the blinds as Hannah's fever finally subsided. Claire stood in the hallway, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching through the partially open bedroom door. William sat slumped in the chair beside Hannah's bed, still holding her hand, his shirt damp with sweat, his eyes closed in exhaustion. Yet his fingers remained curled protectively around Hannah's smaller ones, as if letting go was inconceivable. In that quiet moment between night and morning, as her daughter slept peacefully for the first time in hours, Claire realized something both terrifying and beautiful. This man, this stranger who had entered their lives through a child's impulsive question, was no longer pretending. He was staying. The fever broke just before dawn. William remained in the chair beside Hannah's bed, his body stiff from hours in the same position, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting strips of gold across Hannah's peaceful face. The crisis had passed, leaving behind an altered landscape between them all. Claire appeared in the doorway holding a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. She watched William with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, wariness mixed with something softer, more vulnerable. Hannah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled when she saw William still there, as if his presence was both surprising and exactly what she had expected. "You stayed," she whispered, voice raspy from the night's ordeal. William nodded, throat tight. "Of course I did." Later, as Hannah drifted back to sleep, William joined Claire on the narrow balcony outside the apartment's living room. The morning air bit with winter's chill steam rising from the fresh coffee Claire had made. Below them, the city was waking, cars scraping ice from windshields, early commuters hurrying to bus stops, a newspaper delivery person finishing their route. Normal life continuing, while something fundamental had shifted within these walls. Claire wrapped her hands around her mug, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sun was beginning to burn through morning fog. She said something during the night. Claire began. "Don't leave me too." William's grip tightened on the balcony railing. She remembers him leaving. Claire's shoulders slumped slightly. She was only 2 when James walked out. "I didn't think she'd remember, but she does." Children absorb more than we realize. The silence between them felt weighted with unspoken questions. William finally gave voice to the one that had been growing inside him. "Does he ever contact her, try to see her?" Claire's laugh held no humor. "Not once in 7 years. Clean break, he called it. Said he wasn't cut out for fatherhood." The revelation settled between them, explaining so much about Hannah's initial request on the plane, her immediate trust in William, her fear of abandonment. William gazed out at the city skyline, focusing on a point in the distance. "My son's name was Michael," he said, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "He was 6. He asked me to come to his class once for a science project. They were building volcanoes." Claire remained silent, allowing the space for his story to unfold. "I told him I had a meeting," William continued. "Promised I'd make the next one." His fingers curled around an invisible pain. There was no next one. They were hit by a drunk driver 2 blocks from the school. The morning breeze carried a neighbor's wind chime melody across the silence that followed. William forced himself to continue to speak the truth he'd avoided for 5 years. "I didn't make it to the hospital in time. I didn't make it to anything that mattered." When he finally turned to face Claire, his voice had regained its steadiness, though his hands had not. "I've spent years building systems that understand emotion, and none of them will forgive me for not understanding my own child." Claire studied him, her gaze neither pitying nor judging, simply seeing him clearly. "You think showing up now will make up for that?" No, William replied. "But maybe it's not about making up for anything." His eyes drifted toward Hannah's bedroom door. "Maybe it's just about not walking away this time." In the 4 months that followed, William became a fixture in their lives. Winter deepened, then gradually surrendered to early spring. The pattern of their days shifted to accommodate this new presence. William arriving after work with takeout dinner 3 nights a week, Sunday outings to museums or parks, quiet evenings helping Hannah with homework, while Claire caught up on much-needed rest. Hannah's selective mutism showed remarkable improvement. In February, she answered a question in class, brief and quiet, but audible. By March, she was speaking regularly with 2 classmates and her favorite librarian. Dr. Chen called it exceptional progress, attributing it to the stability Hannah now felt with both William and Claire providing consistent support. William attended parent-teacher conferences alongside Claire, sitting in the 2 small chairs as Ms. Abernathy showed them Hannah's improving work. He rearranged board meetings to make Hannah's therapy appointments, earning raised eyebrows from Thomas Chen, but saying nothing to explain his new priorities. The Nexus AI communication project accelerated, fueled by William's deepening understanding of children with verbal challenges. Claire's wariness gradually softened into something warmer. William noticed the subtle changes, how she no longer tensed when he arrived unannounced, the way she began to call him with everyday questions rather than just emergencies, her willingness to accept his help with Hannah's school tuition and medical expenses. On a rainy Saturday in March, trapped in the Natural History Museum cafe, while a spring downpour hammered the streets outside, Claire's hand brushed against his as they reached for the same sugar packet. Neither pulled away immediately. Something electric and tentative passed between them, a possibility neither was quite ready to name. Nexus Technologies thrived under Williams' paradoxically more balanced leadership. The communication AI platform attracted attention from education specialists and medical communities. Quarterly profits exceeded projections. The board's concerns about Williams' distractions quieted in the face of these successes, though Thomas continued to watch him with calculating eyes, as if waiting for a misstep. On a bright April morning, Sir Williams sat in the principal's office at Washington Heights Elementary, beside Claire, listening as Principal Donovan discussed Hannah's remarkable progress. She's speaking in complete sentences with her close friends. Now Principal Donovan noted, reviewing the report from Hannah's teachers. Ms. Abernathy says she even volunteered an answer during math yesterday. The transformation since December is remarkable. Claire's smile carried the quiet pride of a mother seeing her child overcome a significant obstacle. We've been working with a specialist at Georgetown, and having consistent support at home has made a difference. The principal's gaze shifted between them, a brief assessment that William had grown accustomed to. People trying to determine exactly what relationship existed between the single mother and the billionaire CEO who had become part of their lives. William had stopped caring what conclusions they drew. The reality was more complex and meaningful than any gossip could capture. Principal Donovan's expression grew more serious. There is one matter I wanted to discuss with both of you. Our school registration for next year requires updated emergency contact and guardian information. Claire straightened slightly. I'll update the forms. The principal nodded, then glanced at William. Many of our teachers and staff have noticed Mr. Morgan's regular presence at school events and pickups. For security purposes, we need to know if you should be listed as an authorized guardian, Mr. Morgan. The question hung in the air, more significant than a simple administrative detail. William looked at Claire, unwilling to presume or overstep. This was her decision. Claire hesitated only briefly. Yes, she said. Please add William as Hannah's secondary emergency contact and authorized guardian. The drive back to Claire's apartment was quiet, both processing the weight of what had just transpired. Being listed as Hannah's guardian, even in this limited practical capacity, formalized William's role in a way that made his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. As they pulled up to the apartment building, Claire finally broke the silence. Hannah has a school performance next Friday. Spring concert. She's been practicing. William checked his calendar mentally. Board meeting, quarterly review, investor calls. He'd reschedule them all. I'll be there. Claire nodded, then hesitated before opening the car door. She's never had anyone but me in the audience before. It matters to her that you're coming. William watched Claire walk into the building, considering the careful balance they'd established. This relationship that defied simple categorization. Not quite family yet, more than friendship. The boundaries remained deliberately unspoken, protective barriers around hearts that had known too much disappointment. That evening, as William reviewed quarterly reports in his penthouse, his phone lit up with a text from Claire. A photo of Hannah's school project, a diorama of a rainforest with meticulous details. She worked on it all afternoon, wanted you to see it. William's response was immediate. It's incredible. Tell her I'm proud of her. 3 dots appeared as Claire typed, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she says you can tell her yourself tomorrow. Good night, William. He stared at the message longer than necessary, a warm feeling expanding in his chest. The penthouse no longer felt like a sanctuary of solitude, but a too empty space, missing the chaos and warmth he'd grown accustomed to in Claire's apartment. William glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. He'd spent another evening working instead of living. The realization troubled him in a way it never had before. The following week unfolded with comfortable routine, work during days, evenings with Claire and Hannah, a weekend trip to the Smithsonian, where Hannah spoke directly to a museum docent for the first time. William began leaving his office earlier, delegating tasks he once would have handled personally, prioritizing his presence over his productivity. Thursday evening, as Hannah showed William her concert outfit, a white blouse and navy skirt, a sharp knock at the apartment door interrupted their conversation. Claire opened it, then froze, her body language shifting instantly from relaxed to defensive. What are you doing here? Claire's voice carried a tension William had never heard before. A man's voice answered, smooth and confident. Is that any way to greet an old friend? I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by. William moved to the entryway, Hannah close behind him. The visitor stood in the hallway. early 40s, expensively dressed in a casual way that suggested careful calculation, his posture radiating entitled confidence. His smile faltered slightly at the sight of William. "Who's this?" the man asked, an edge entering his voice. Claire's spine straightened, her chin lifting. "William, this is James Harrison, Hannah's father." The introduction landed like a physical blow. William had known of James's existence, of course, but had imagined him as a distant figure, not this flesh and blood reality standing in Claire's doorway with proprietary ease. James extended his hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Well, well. William Morgan, right? I've seen you in the business journals. Interesting company you're keeping these days, Claire." William shook the offered hand, assessing the man who had walked away from Hannah 7 years ago. Behind him, he felt Hannah press against his leg, her body tense with anxiety. James's gaze shifted to his daughter. "There she is. Look how big you've gotten, Hannah." Hannah remained silent, her fingers gripping the fabric of William's pants. James's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Still not talking much, huh? Well, that's okay. We've got time to get reacquainted." Claire stepped forward, placing herself between James and Hannah. "What do you want, James? Why are you here after 7 years?" James adjusted his designer watch, the gesture deliberately drawing attention to its expense. "Things change. People mature. I've been doing some thinking about family lately." Claire's laugh held no warmth. "Convenient timing considering your campaign." William's attention sharpened. "Campaign." James smiled broadly, suddenly the picture of a politician. "I'm running for city council, platform of family values and community investment." He reached into his jacket, producing a glossy brochure featuring his photo against a backdrop of Washington landmarks. "Public service has always been a passion." Claire's expression hardened. "This isn't a campaign stop, James. You can't just walk back into her life because it looks good for your image." James's affable facade slipped, revealing something colder beneath. "She's my daughter, Claire. My blood. I have rights." "Rights you signed away," Claire shot back, "along with any responsibility." James glanced meaningfully at William, then back to Claire. "Yet you're letting some CEO play house with my daughter." "What is this, Claire? A rich boyfriend to solve your problems?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberately provocative. William felt Hannah's grip tighten on his leg. Before he could respond, Claire stepped closer to James, her voice low and controlled. "You need to leave, now." James held his ground, his smile returning, but failing to mask the calculation in his eyes. "Actually, I'm filing for legal guardianship. Hannah deserves stability, not some corporate godfather who decided he cares because a child looked at him twice." The words landed with precision, finding vulnerable spots William hadn't realized were exposed. James continued, his voice reasonable, practiced. "You're letting your daughter get attached to a man who won't stay, Claire. We both know men like him don't do family for long." Claire's voice cracked for the first time. "You left when she was 2 years old. She cried for months." James shrugged, the gesture dismissive of both the past and the pain it had caused. "I wasn't ready then. I am now." "No," Claire replied, her voice regaining its strength. "You're not. You're running a campaign and you want a photo op." James's jaw tightened to the first crack in his polished veneer. "You can't prove that. I don't need to," Claire said, "because she's mine and she's safe. For the first time in her life, she's safe." The threat lay between them, clear and unavoidable. James's gaze shifted to William, assessing him with newfound intensity. "This isn't over," he said finally. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." After James left, the apartment fell into heavy silence. Hannah disappeared into her room, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt louder than if she had slammed it. Claire stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, as if physically holding herself together. William approached carefully, respecting her need for space while offering his presence. "I'll call my lawyer tonight." Claire nodded, her eyes distant. "He wants her because of you." The statement caught William off guard. "What do you mean?" Claire's laugh held no humor. "James doesn't care about Hannah, never has. But he saw you here, William Morgan, tech billionaire, and suddenly his daughter is valuable, a weapon against me and a prop for his campaign." William processed this, the implications settling like stones. A thought occurred that made his stomach twist. "Has he been watching us? How did he know I would be here tonight?" Claire looked up sharply, the same realization dawning. The park last weekend, the museum before that. She moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. Do you think he's had us followed? The possibility hung between them, adding a new dimension of threat to James's appearance. William pulled out his phone. I'm having security come by tonight, just to be safe. After arranging for discreet security personnel to monitor the apartment building, William found Hannah sitting on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, expression closed. He knocked softly on the doorframe, waiting for her permission to enter. Hannah looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Is he making me go with him? The direct question, so characteristic of Hannah, pierced William's heart. No, he answered firmly. Your mother won't let that happen, and neither will I. Hannah nodded, accepting his assurance with the simple faith of a child who had come to trust his word. He wasn't always my dad, she said quietly. He wasn't there when I lost my tooth or when I was sick or when I had nightmares. William sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance while offering his presence. People make mistakes, Hannah, sometimes big ones. Hannah's gaze met his, direct and unflinching. Like you with Michael. The question stole his breath. He hadn't realized she knew about his son, though he shouldn't have been surprised by her observation skills. Yes, he admitted, like me with Michael. Hannah considered this, then nodded as if confirming something to herself. But you're here now. The simple statement contained a profound truth, one that both absolved and challenged him. Yes, William agreed. I'm here now. That night, after Hannah had finally fallen asleep, William and Claire sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea growing cold between them, as they confronted the new reality James had thrust upon them. William's attorney, Rebecca Lawson, had already been briefed by phone and would meet them tomorrow. Claire pushed her mug away, fatigue evident in every line of her body. He's going to try to take her, isn't he? William nodded, unwilling to sugarcoat the threat. He'll try, but we won't let him succeed. Claire's eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement of the we that had formed between them. Partners now in this unexpected battle. What do? We fight, William said simply, with every resource at our disposal. The following morning, William's driver took them to the offices of Lawson and Associates, a prestigious family law firm occupying the top floor of a downtown high-rise. The conference room offered a panoramic view of the city, the Potomac River glinting in the distance. Rebecca Lawson, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with the focused intensity of someone who had never lost a case she cared about, spread documents across the polished table. James Harrison has already filed for partial custody. Rebecca began getting directly to the point. His attorney is claiming that as Hannah's biological father, he has inherent rights that were never properly terminated. Claire leaned forward. He signed papers relinquishing his parental rights when Hannah was 2. Rebecca nodded. I've requested those documents, but family court can be unpredictable when biological parents seek to reestablish relationships with their children. Judges often favor reunification when possible. William's jaw tightened. Even when the father abandoned the child for 7 years, that will certainly work in our favor, Rebecca acknowledged. But Mr. Harrison has advantages too. Financial stability, political connections, and the biological connection that courts often prioritize. She turned to William. And your presence complicates matters. William straightened. How so? Rebecca's expression remained neutral, professional. Mr. Harrison's petition specifically mentions, and I quote, the inappropriate insertion of an unrelated adult male figure into my daughter's life. He's positioning you as an interloper, Mr. Morgan, someone overstepping boundaries. Claire's hand found William's under the table, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes. William is important to Hannah. Her selective mutism has improved dramatically since he's been in her life. Rebecca made a note. That's helpful. The psychological impact will be significant to the court. She looked up, her expression softening slightly. What we need is a counter strategy. Mr. Harrison has filed for partial custody. I suggest we file for temporary co-guardianship for Mr. Morgan. The suggestion hung in the air, its implications expanding between them. Co-guardianship would formalize William's role in Hannah's life in a way that went far beyond emergency contact forms at school. This would give you legal standing in the case, Rebecca explained. It shows commitment and stability rather than the temporary involvement Mr. Harrison is alleging. William turned to Claire, searching her expression. This has to be your decision. Claire didn't hesitate. Let's do it. The weeks that followed unfolded in a blur of legal paperwork, psychological evaluations, and background checks. James's petition triggered a comprehensive family court investigation requiring all parties to submit to interviews and home assessments. William found himself answering deeply personal questions about his relationship with Hannah, his intentions toward Claire, his ability to provide emotional stability after his own family tragedy. Media attention grew as James's campaign gained momentum. His platform of family values and parental rights gained traction among conservative voters, while carefully crafted leaks positioned Claire as an obstacle to a father's relationship with his daughter. William's involvement became fodder for business publications, questioning his focus on Nexus Technologies. Hannah retreated further into silence as the pressure mounted. Her progress with selective mutism reversed. She stopped speaking at school, entirely communicating only with Claire and William at home, and even then with increasing reluctance. Dr. Chen expressed concern about the psychological impact of the custody dispute, recommending increased therapy sessions and consistency in Hannah's home routine. By early May, the pressure from multiple directions reached a breaking point. William arrived at Nexus headquarters for a scheduled board meeting to find Thomas Chen waiting in his office, tablet in hand, displaying a financial news site. The headline read, "Morgan's personal drama spooks investors, Nexus stock drops 12% amid custody battle." Shareholders are concerned, Thomas began without preamble. This custody situation is becoming a liability to the company. William maintained his composure, though anger simmered beneath the surface. "My personal life is not open for board discussion." "Thomas, it is when it affects share price," Thomas countered. "You've been distracted for months, missed meetings, delegated critical decisions, left early repeatedly. The board has been patient out of respect for what you built, but patience has limits." The unspoken threat hung between them. William had founded Nexus, but he wasn't immune to board action if they determined his leadership was compromising the company's value. "What exactly are you suggesting?" William asked, his voice deliberately controlled. Thomas set the tablet on the desk. "Disentangle yourself from this situation. It's a mess that can only damage both you and Nexus. Whatever emotional attachment you formed to this child and her mother, it isn't worth your life's work." The statement crystallized something William had been feeling for months, but hadn't fully articulated. 5 years ago, he would have agreed with Thomas without hesitation. Now the calculation had fundamentally changed. "You're wrong," William said quietly. "Some things are worth more than market value." Thomas studied him, genuine confusion crossing his features. "This isn't like you, William. You've always understood that personal sentiment has no place in business decisions." William's laugh held no humor. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's always been the problem." The board meeting that followed was tense, with William fending off increasingly direct questions about his commitment to Nexus's future. He left the building afterward with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The company that had been his refuge from grief now felt like another prison, one he had built himself from ambition and emotional avoidance. That evening, William arrived at Claire's apartment to find Dr. Chen leaving after an emergency session with Hannah. The doctor's expression was grave as she pulled William aside in the hallway. "Hannah had a panic attack at school today," Dr. Chen explained. "Completely stopped speaking, even with Ms. Abernathy. When asked about the upcoming court date, she became physically distressed, hyperventilating, crying." William's stomach tightened. "How can we help her?" Dr. Chen sighed, professional detachment momentarily giving way to genuine concern. "She's terrified of being forced to live with a man she doesn't know. The uncertainty is triggering severe anxiety." The court proceedings are undoing months of progress with her selective mutism. Inside the apartment, William found Claire sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread before her. Legal documents, Hannah's medical records, school reports. Her face showed the strain of weeks under siege, fighting a battle on multiple fronts while trying to maintain normalcy for her daughter. "We need to consider a compromise," Claire said without preamble. "This is destroying Hannah." William sat across from her, taking in the implications of her statement. "What kind of compromise?" Claire pushed a document toward him. "A proposal from James's attorney offering joint legal custody with primary physical custody remaining with Claire. Hannah would spend 1 weekend a month with James, gradually increasing to alternating weekends." "He's backing off full custody," Claire explained. "Rebecca thinks it's because the psychological evaluation raised concerns about Hannah's anxiety. Or maybe he's realized a drawn-out court battle looks bad for his campaign." William reviewed the document, noting the careful legal language that positioned James as the reasonable party seeking relationship with his daughter. It also included a clause specifically prohibiting overnight stays at the residences of unrelated adults, a transparent attempt to limit William's involvement. "This is targeted at me," William noted. "He's trying to force me out of Hannah's life." Claire nodded, fatigue evident in every line of her body. "He sees you as competition and as leverage against me." William set the document down, his decision already made. If accepting this compromise would reduce Hannah's anxiety, he would find ways to remain present in her life, regardless of James's restrictions. Her well-being mattered more than his pride or his desire for the family they had begun to form. Before he could voice this, a small sound from the hallway drew their attention. Hannah stood watching them, her expression unnervingly adult in its comprehension. She approached the table, her steps deliberate despite the tension visible in her small frame. "I want to talk to the judge," she announced, her voice quiet but clear. Claire straightened, surprise and concern warring in her expression. "Hannah, you don't have to do that. We're trying to figure this out without making you talk in court." Hannah shook her head, determination evident in the set of her jaw. "I want to say what I think. It's my life too." The declaration hung between them. The first time Hannah had actively inserted herself into the situation, rather than reacting to decisions made around her. William studied her, seeing not fragility, but unexpected strength in her stance. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't speaking up," he said gently. "It's knowing when your voice matters most." Hannah nodded as if he had confirmed something she already knew. "Can you help me practice what to say?" Later that night, after helping Hannah formulate her thoughts and rehearse speaking them aloud, William stood on Claire's small balcony. The night sky had cleared after days of spring rain stars visible between buildings. Claire joined him, wrapping a cardigan around herself against the evening chill. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Claire asked. Letting her speak to the judge, William considered the question carefully. Hannah's psychologist had concerns about the pressure of testifying, but acknowledged that giving Hannah agency in the process might actually reduce her anxiety. "I think we're honoring her courage," he finally replied. "She wants to be heard." Claire leaned against the railing, her shoulder touching his, a point of warmth in the cool night. "When James left, I promised myself I'd never let anyone hurt her again. I built walls around us, convinced myself we were safer alone." Her voice softened. "Then you appeared, and suddenly those walls didn't seem so necessary." William turned toward her, the city lights casting half her face in shadow. "I never expected any of this. After Michael and Kate died, I thought that part of my life was over. I built Nexus into my identity because it couldn't disappoint me. It couldn't die." Claire's eyes met his, understanding flowing between them. And now William's gaze drifted to the stars above, then back to Claire. "Now I'm discovering that safety isn't about walls. It's about finding people worth the risk of pain." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Claire moved closer, her hand finding his on the railing. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said quietly, "we face it together." William nodded, the simple promise more meaningful than any corporate contract he'd ever signed. Together. Inside, Hannah had fallen asleep, surrounded by stuffed animals, her breathing deep and even. On her nightstand lay a carefully folded note she had written for William, discovered when he'd helped her prepare for bed. It contained just 5 words. "Don't forget your promise. Please." The night before the court hearing, William dreamed of Michael for the first time in years. Not the nightmare of screeching tires and breaking glass that had haunted him after the accident, but Michael building a volcano on their kitchen table, looking up with excitement as baking soda and vinegar erupted in a satisfying foam. In the dream, William wasn't running late or checking his phone. He was simply present, helping his son create something, laughing together as the lava overflowed. He woke with tears on his face, but a strange peace in his heart. The dream felt like permission, though, from whom or for what he wasn't entirely sure. The courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its stone facade imposing and institutional. William drove Claire and Hannah, all three dressed in their best clothes. Hannah in a navy dress with white collar, Claire in a modest gray suit she used for job interviews, William in the least intimidating of his business attire. Hannah clutched her backpack, which contained the memory box she had been assembling for weeks. Photos, drawings, small mementos of her time with William and Claire together. In the parking lot, Claire knelt to Hannah's eye level, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from her dress. "Remember what Dr. Chen said? You only have to speak if you want to. No one will be angry if you change your mind." Hannah nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. I'm ready, Mom. Inside the courthouse bustled with morning activity, attorneys hurrying between courtrooms, clerks carrying stacks of files, anxious families waiting on hard wooden benches. Rebecca met them at the entrance to Family Court 3, her confidence providing an anchor in the storm of uncertainty. Judge Winters is fair, Rebecca assured them. She prioritizes the child's well-being above all else. As they entered the courtroom, William spotted James already seated at the respondent's table with his attorney, an older man with a reputation for aggressive family court litigation. James wore a carefully selected outfit that projected responsible fatherhood, not too formal, not too casual, with a small American flag pinned on his lapel. The campaign consultant's touch was evident in every detail. Several rows behind James sat a small team of people William recognized as campaign staff, notebooks ready. This was as much political theater as legal proceeding for James, a performance designed for public consumption regardless of the outcome. Hannah gripped William's hand tighter as they walked past James to the petitioner's table. Her palm felt small and damp with nervous sweat, but her steps remained steady. Judge Elizabeth Winters entered the courtroom. Her robes crisp, her expression neutral but alert. In her late 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing eyes that suggested little escaped her notice, she commanded immediate respect. The court will hear Parker versus Harrison regarding custodial arrangements for minor child. Hannah Grace Parker, Judge Winters, began, her voice clear and authoritative. I have reviewed the filing's psychological evaluations and home study reports. Before hearing arguments, I want to clarify the court's priority, the well-being of the child in question. Her gaze swept the courtroom, lingering briefly on the campaign staff with their notebooks. This proceeding is about a child's future, not political narratives or personal vendettas. I expect all parties to remember that. James's attorney rose first, presenting an argument that emphasized biological connection, James's financial stability, and his natural desire to reconnect with his daughter. He positioned James as a changed man who had matured and now wished to assume his rightful role in Hannah's life. The performance was polished, designed to appeal to traditional values about family structure. When Rebecca presented Claire's case, she focused on consistency and psychological well-being. Hannah's progress was selective mutism, her stable home environment, and the potential damage of disrupting her security. She addressed William's role, directly presenting evidence from Dr. Chen about the positive impact his presence had on Hannah's development. James's attorney countered aggressively, characterizing William as an unrelated male figure, whose involvement confused proper family boundaries. He intimated that William's interest in Hannah stemmed from romantic pursuit of Claire rather than genuine concern for the child, a suggestion that caused William's jaw to tighten with controlled anger. Throughout the arguments, Hannah sat between Claire and William, her back straight, her expression focused despite the obvious anxiety in her tight grip on both their hands. When Judge Winters finally asked if anyone else wished to address the court, Hannah raised her hand before either attorney could respond. The courtroom stilled. Judge Winters leaned forward slightly. Yes, young lady. Hannah looked up at Claire, then William, drawing strength from their presence. I would like to speak. Please, she said, her voice small but clear in the hushed room. Judge Winters nodded, her expression softening slightly. The court would be pleased to hear from you, Hannah. Would you like to speak from your seat, or would you prefer to come forward? Hannah considered the question with characteristic seriousness. I want to come forward, she decided. William felt his heart constrict as Hannah stood, releasing their hands. She walked to the center of the courtroom. Her steps measured her backpack, clutched to her chest like armor. Sunlight suddenly broke through clouds outside, streaming through the high windows and illuminating her small figure in a shaft of gold. The courtroom waited collectively, holding its breath. Hannah reached into her backpack and removed her memory box, a shoebox decorated with drawings and stickers. She opened it carefully, revealing the treasures inside: the drawing of 3 figures standing before a house, a movie ticket stub from their first outing together, a small stone William had found shaped like a heart during a walk in Rock Creek Park, a pressed flower from Claire's birthday bouquet. My name is Hannah Grace Parker, she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. I have selective mutism. That means sometimes I can't talk even when I want to. It feels like my throat closes up and the words get stuck. She looked directly at Judge Winters, establishing a connection that excluded the attorneys, the campaign staff, even Claire and William. I already have a dad. I chose him. Her gaze flickered briefly to William, then back to the judge. He reads me stories and helps me with math and stayed all night when I was sick. He doesn't make promises he won't keep. Hannah turned slightly, addressing James directly for the first time. I don't need someone who forgot me. I need someone who stays. The simplicity and clarity of her statement hung in the air. James's confident facade cracked visibly, his expression flickering between surprise and calculation as he processed the potential damage of this moment to his carefully constructed narrative. Hannah turned back to Judge Winters. Her piece said her courage expended. The judge nodded with genuine respect. Thank you, Hannah. You've been very brave and very clear. You may return to your seat now. As Hannah walked back, William fought the urge to meet her halfway to sweep her into a protective embrace. Instead, he waited, allowing her the dignity of completing her journey alone. When she reached them both, he and Claire enfolded her between them, a physical promise of safety and pride. Judge Winters studied the scene thoughtfully, then addressed the courtroom. In light of the testimony heard today and the evidence presented, this court is not prepared to grant Mr. Harrison's petition for joint legal custody at this time. Relief flooded through William, though he maintained his composure for Hannah's sake. Judge Winters continued, her tone measured. However, neither will I completely sever a biological parent's opportunity for relationship. The court orders continued psychological evaluation of all parties with supervised visitation between Mr. Harrison and Hannah to begin only when deemed appropriate by the child's therapist. She turned her attention directly to James. Mr. Harrison, your daughter has expressed herself with remarkable clarity today. I suggest you listen to what she has told you. Relationship cannot be mandated by court order. It must be earned through consistent presence and respect for boundaries. The gavel fell with finality. Case continued for evaluation in 90 days. Outside on the courthouse steps, spring sunshine warmed the air as Hannah skipped down beside Claire, the tension of the morning releasing in physical energy. William followed more slowly, processing the mixed victory. James's petition had been denied, but the judge had left the door open for his eventual involvement in Hannah's life. The battle wasn't over, merely postponed. As they reached the bottom of the steps, a voice called from behind them. Morgan, a word. William turned to find James approaching his campaign staff, conspicuously absent. Claire tensed, moving protectively closer to Hannah. James stopped a respectful distance away, his expression unreadable. I'd like to speak with you. Privately. Not happening, Claire began, but William raised a hand gently. It's all right, he said. I'll hear what he has to say. Claire hesitated, then nodded. We'll wait in the car. Her eyes conveyed a clear warning to James before she led Hannah toward the parking lot. When they were alone, James's carefully maintained facade slipped, revealing something more complex than the ambitious politician William had categorized him as. I underestimated her, James admitted, watching Hannah's retreating figure. I didn't think she'd speak. Or that she'd choose you. William said nothing, waiting for whatever had prompted this unexpected approach. James turned back to him, calculation returning to his expression. I could appeal, drag this out for years, make it expensive and painful for everyone. The threat hung between them, its purpose unclear. Leverage or simply spite. William maintained his composure. You could, but you won't. James raised an eyebrow. You sound very certain about that. William studied the man who had fathered Hannah, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the fundamental insecurity beneath. I am certain, because despite everything you heard her today, and something in you recognized the truth of what she said. James's confidence faltered momentarily, a flicker of genuine emotion crossing his features before being quickly suppressed. Name your price, Morgan. Everyone has one. William shook his head, a sad smile touching his lips. Not everyone, and certainly not for this. He turned to leave, but James's voice stopped him. She's my blood, Morgan, my daughter. You're just a replacement, a stand-in. William looked back, meeting James's gaze directly. Fatherhood isn't biology. It's showing up every day, especially when it's hard. You still have time to learn that lesson if you're willing. As William walked away, leaving James on the courthouse steps, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Not the outcome of the hearing, though that was part of it, but the recognition of a truth he had been avoiding for 5 years. Presence mattered more than perfection. Showing up, even imperfectly, was the only way to truly love. In the car, Hannah sat in the back seat, her memory box open on her lap as she carefully replaced each item. Claire watched William approach, her expression questioning. William nodded reassuringly as he slid into the driver's seat. Everything okay? Claire asked quietly. William started the engine, glancing at Hannah in the rearview mirror. Her eyes met his, trusting and clear. Yes, he answered, finding the word completely true for the first time in years. Everything is okay. The summer brought a tentative peace. Judge Winter's ruling had created breathing room, though not a complete victory. James Harrison remained a shadow figure in their lives, his custody petition denied, but the door left open for supervised visitation. Hannah met with the court-appointed psychologist twice monthly, making steady progress in both her selective mutism and her ability to establish boundaries. William rearranged his executive schedule to drive her to these appointments, waiting in sterile reception areas, with the patience that once seemed reserved only for billion-dollar negotiations. At Nexus Technologies, the communication AI platform had evolved beyond William's initial vision. What began as a personal connection to Hannah's challenges had blossomed into the company's most promising innovation. Children's hospitals across 3 states had implemented pilot programs with early results, showing remarkable breakthroughs for nonverbal patients. William found himself speaking about the technology with an authenticity that surprised his executive team, drawing from lived experience rather than market research, infusing technical specifications with human understanding. Claire watched this transformation with quiet amazement. The corporate titan who had stepped into their lives as a temporary father figure had become essential in ways none of them had anticipated. Yet uncertainty lingered beneath their new routine. James's potential return, the undefined nature of William and Claire's relationship, and the absence of legal protection for the family they were building. Memorial Hospital's summer picnic is next Saturday, Claire mentioned one evening as she reviewed her schedule. Hannah's been talking about it for weeks. William looked up from his laptop. The water balloon toss championship. Apparently you've been recruited. Claire's smile carried a warmth that still caught him off guard. She's been practicing her throwing technique with stuffed animals. These casual inclusions, Hannah's automatic assumption of his presence at family events, continued to surprise William. Each invitation represented a bittersweet reminder of what he'd missed with Michael and what he'd unexpectedly found with Hannah. The hospital picnic sprawled across a shaded park, transforming buttoned-up medical professionals into parents manning grills, organizing 3-legged races, and dispensing popsicles to overheated children. William felt momentarily out of place among Claire's colleagues until Hannah grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the gathering crowd for the water balloon toss. "We have strategy," she whispered, her serious expression contrasting with the festive atmosphere. "I throw, you catch, just like practice." Martin, the head of pediatrics, and Claire's supervisor sidled up beside William as they waited for the event to begin. "So, you're the famous William Morgan. Hannah talks about you constantly during her checkups." William raised an eyebrow. "Hannah talks during checkups. Full sentences for the past 2 visits." Dr. Martin's tone carried professional appreciation. "Asked very specific questions about AI applications in pediatric care. Wanted my opinion on technology integration in treatment protocols." The revelation warmed something in William's chest. Hannah had been absorbing his dinner conversations about the Nexus project, finding connections to her own experiences. More significantly, she was speaking to medical professionals, a milestone in her selective mutism recovery that hadn't been reported to William or Claire. The water balloon toss began Hannah's focus laser sharp as she calculated trajectories and adjusted her technique with each round. They advanced steadily, Hannah's surprising accuracy compensating for William's rusty catching skills. In the final round against Dr. Trem, Martin and his teenage son Hannah's competitive spirit emerged fully. "We've got this," she whispered, her game face engaged. "Remember the physics." They ultimately lost when William lunged too aggressively for a high throw, the balloon bursting against his chest in a refreshing explosion. Hannah's laughter, unreserved and joyful, erupted immediately, the sound more valuable than any victory. Later, as twilight painted the sky in watercolor hues, William found himself at the dessert table beside Nurse Rodriguez, who had worked with Claire for years. "Claire's different since you came along." She noted her assessment, direct but not unkind. "Lighter, more present." William selected a brownie, considering his response. "She's an extraordinary woman. Always has been." "She is," Rodriguez agreed. "But she used to move through life like she was perpetually in the ER, always triaging, never pausing, convinced that if she slowed down for even a moment, something essential would collapse." The nurse glanced toward where Claire sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket, patiently allowing Hannah to decorate her cheek with wobbly painted stars. You've given her permission to breathe. The observation settled deeply. William had never considered that his presence might be liberating rather than imposing. That by sharing responsibilities, he wasn't taking over, but creating space, the same space Claire had created for him, to rediscover parts of himself long buried under grief and ambition. As fireflies emerged, lighting the darkening park with intermittent gold, families began gathering their belongings. Hannah ran ahead to help collect abandoned cups and plates, her sense of responsibility undiminished by the day's festivities. Claire moved beside William, silver stars still adorning her cheek, catching the last light of day. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. It meant everything to her, and to me, Shane. William's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, fingers intertwining with a naturalness that still surprised him. "I'm learning that showing up is the only thing that really matters." August brought a new challenge. Thomas Chen scheduled an emergency board meeting on Wednesday morning, directly conflicting with Hannah's science fair presentation. For weeks, she had worked on her project, a detailed model of the water cycle complete with actual evaporation and precipitation. Though William had helped construct the base structure, the concept and execution were entirely Hannah's. She'd spoken of nothing else for days, practicing her presentation points each evening with growing confidence. William rescheduled the board meeting without explanation or apology. Thomas's displeasure arrived via terse email questioning William's commitment to Nexus's future and reminding him that several major investors had expressed concern about his divided focus. The implicit threat was clear: William's position as CEO, while seemingly secure given his founder status, was not beyond challenge if the board united against him. William filed the concern away. Today belonged to Hannah. The science fair transformed the school gymnasium into a showcase of childish ingenuity, solar system mobiles hanging from basketball hoops, baking soda volcanoes positioned at cautious distances from one another, charts documenting plant growth under varying conditions. Hannah's station stood near the center, her display boards meticulously labeled with information about condensation, evaporation, and precipitation. The actual model, a terrarium-like structure with a heat lamp creating real evaporation that then condensed on the plastic cover and rained back onto the landscape, drew impressed crowds. William stood slightly apart, allowing Hannah her moment of academic glory. Ms. Abernathy approached, clipboard in hand, as she evaluated projects. Hannah's explanation of the water cycle was remarkably detailed, she noted. Her verbal presentation skills have shown tremendous improvement. Pride swelled in William's chest. "She's been practicing at home." Ms. Abernathy smiled knowingly. "She mentioned you're helping her build a backup model, just in case." The comment caught William off guard. A second water cycle model sat in his home office, constructed at Hannah's insistence, though he'd never fully understood why she wanted a duplicate. Now understanding dawned: Hannah was ensuring preparedness, protecting against disappointment. The precaution revealed both her lingering anxiety and her problem-solving approach to it. When the judges reached Hannah's station, William watched her begin her explanation. Her voice emerged clear and steady, technical terms pronounced with precision as she guided them through the water cycle process. When one judge asked a challenging question about atmospheric pressure, Hannah paused, considered, then offered a thoughtful answer that connected to information beyond her display. Claire arrived directly from her hospital shift, still in scrubs, unwilling to miss the moment despite her exhaustion. Her eyes met William's across the gymnasium, sharing a silent recognition of Hannah's courage and growth. The awards ceremony brought another surprise. Hannah received not only a blue ribbon for scientific accuracy, but also special recognition for presentation skills. Later in the car, she clutched the ribbons tightly. "I wasn't scared this time," she announced, wonder in her voice. The words just came out right. William caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. "You did all the hard work, Hannah. You should be very proud." Hannah considered this with characteristic seriousness. It's easier to be brave when you know someone will be there no matter what happens. The simple truth resonated deeply. William had built his post-accident life around self-sufficiency, convinced that emotional independence was the only safe harbor after loss. Hannah's perspective offered a profound alternative, that courage flourished not in isolation, but in connection. Upon returning to his office that afternoon, William found an urgent message from Thomas Chen requesting his immediate presence in the boardroom. The summons carried an unmistakable tone of confrontation. William straightened his tie, centered himself, and proceeded to what he sensed would be a pivotal moment for his future with Nexus. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. Around the polished table sat the full executive team and major shareholders, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. At the head of the table, Thomas stood beside a projection screen displaying Nexus's stock performance, a concerning downward trend highlighted in alarming red. "We've been patient, William," Thomas began without preamble. "Too patient, according to some of our investors. Quarterly projections down 17%. Meridian integration behind schedule. And this morning, while you were attending a grade school science fair, our chief competitor announced a communication AI platform that mirrors our development roadmap almost exactly." William took his seat, maintaining composure as he assessed the faces around him. These were people he'd selected, mentored, trusted. Their current alignment against him reflected not just business concerns, but a fundamental misunderstanding of what he'd been building. "The AI communication project has revolutionary potential," William countered, opening his tablet to display the latest test results. "Our integration with children's hospitals in Boston and Chicago has shown unprecedented success rates with nonverbal patients." Thomas shook his head dismissively. "The market cares about deployment timelines and revenue projections, not feel-good stories about helping children. Your personal involvement with this Parker girl has clouded your judgment, William. The board needs to know if you're still the right person to lead Nexus forward." The challenge hung in the air, explicit and unavoidable. William surveyed the room again, recognizing the crossroads before him. 3 years ago, he would have immediately pivoted to appease the board, recommitting to profit margins, distancing himself from the emotional aspects of the project, perhaps even stepping back from Hannah and Claire to demonstrate his corporate dedication. Today, that option felt hollow. William stood, moving to the head of the table beside the display screen. Without speaking, he changed the projection to a video. Hannah, at 6 years old, sitting in a hospital room attempting to communicate with a doctor. Her fear was evident in her rigid posture, her silence absolute despite the doctor's gentle encouragement. Then William advanced the video to footage from last week. Hannah explaining her water cycle project to Dr. Chen, her voice clear, her hands gesturing expressively as she detailed the scientific principles involved. 3 days ago, William began, his voice steady but infused with an emotion the boardroom rarely witnessed. "I watched a little girl who once couldn't speak to her doctors stand before judges and explain atmospheric pressure and condensation. The communication tools we're developing made that possible not just for Hannah, but potentially for millions of children trapped in silence by anxiety, trauma, or developmental challenges." He advanced the slide to market projections that extended beyond quarterly reports, showcasing long-term integration potential across medical, educational, and therapeutic applications. "I know you've all seen the report's projected ROI, risk analysis, competitive positioning. Everything looks clean on paper." William clicked to another slide, Hannah's drawing of 3 figures standing before a simple house. 3 days ago, I watched a courtroom nearly send a 6-year-old girl back to a man who only saw her as a pawn because he looked clean on paper. Numbers without context, intelligence without empathy. The boardroom remained silent, the atmosphere shifting from confrontational to uncertain. Sophia Reyes, head of product development, and the only woman on the executive team, leaned forward. "William, this isn't about emotion. This is a shareholder decision." William nodded, acknowledging the reality while refusing to accept its limitations. "Then let's be honest about what we're sharing. Risk without context, intelligence without empathy, technology without purpose." He clicked to a photograph of Hannah from the science fair, her face alight with achievement. "She chose me in that courtroom, not because of my title or bank account, but because I showed up. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about what we're building here at Nexus. Our AI isn't valuable because it processes language. It's valuable because it helps people connect when connection seems impossible." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "The board appreciates your passion, William, but passion doesn't satisfy shareholders." William met his gaze directly. "Actually, it does, when that passion translates to vision beyond quarterly returns. Our communication platform isn't just another product. It's potentially transformative for millions of families. I'm not asking you to choose between profit and purpose. I'm showing you how they align." For the next hour, William presented a revised strategic plan that positioned the communication AI platform as the cornerstone of Nexus's future, not as a charitable sideline, but as its core business evolution. He detailed integration partnerships with major healthcare systems, educational licensing structures, and therapeutic applications that extended far beyond his initial concept. The market wasn't just viable, it was virtually untapped, with Nexus positioned to define the standards rather than compete within them. By meeting's end, the atmosphere had transformed. Several board members who had entered ready to challenge Williams' leadership now leaned forward with engaged questions about implementation timelines. Thomas remained skeptical, but recognized the shift in the room. William hadn't just defended his position, he'd expanded their collective vision. As the meeting concluded, Thomas pulled William aside. You could have led with the market expansion plan rather than the emotional appeal. William smiled slightly. 5 years ago, I would have. But I've learned that the why matters as much as the what. We're not just building technology, Thomas. We're building bridges for people who have been isolated. That purpose will drive this company further than profit margins alone ever could. The following morning, William's phone rang with an unexpected name on the display, James Harrison. William hesitated before answering, wariness mingling with curiosity. We need to talk, James began without greeting. Tomorrow, the Riverside Cafe, just you and me. William considered declining, but something in James's tone suggested importance beyond antagonism. 10 o'clock. On the cafe James had chosen sat along the Potomac, far from the political circles where he typically operated. William arrived first, selecting a corner table with a view of both the door and the river. James entered precisely on time, dressed casually but expensively campaign polish, momentarily set aside. He slid into the booth across from William, the formality of their courthouse interactions replaced by something more direct, if not quite candid. I'm withdrawing my custody petition, James announced without preamble. The paperwork will be filed this afternoon. William studied him, searching for the angle, the hidden agenda behind this unexpected concession. Why now? James stirred his coffee, methodically, gaze fixed on the swirling liquid rather than meeting William's eyes. My campaign manager showed me the polling data. Turns out custody battles don't play well with female voters between 25 and 45. Key demographic. The political calculation rang true but felt incomplete. William waited, sensing there was more beneath the surface. James finally looked up, something unreadable crossing his features. She spoke to me, Hannah, at the supervised visit last week. First time since this whole thing started. Interest sharpened William's attention. The court-mandated visits had been proceeding with minimal progress, according to Claire. Hannah polite, but distant, James awkward and performative. What did she say? James's laugh held no humor. She asked if I remembered her second birthday. Said she had a photograph of me holding her next to a cake with 2 candles. Wanted to know if I remembered what song we sang. The question's innocent simplicity carried devastating weight, a child seeking confirmation that her earliest memories were real, that she had existed in her father's life, even briefly. I didn't remember, James admitted, something like shame crossing his expression. Not the song, not the cake, not even being there, though obviously I was. He shook his head. What kind of father doesn't remember his kid's birthday? William remained silent, recognizing that any response would sound either condescending or disingenuous. James continued his typical confidence, notably absent. I thought I wanted to be in her life. Maybe I did for the campaign, for the image. But the reality, he gestured vaguely, she needs things I don't know how to give. Consistency, patience, actual attention. The admission carried unexpected honesty. William leaned forward slightly. She's an extraordinary kid, James, worth the effort of learning those things. James studied him with newfound assessment. You really care about her. It's not just about Claire. The question might once have seemed offensive. Now William simply nodded. Hannah changed everything for me. Showed me what I'd been missing by hiding in my work after Michael died. James reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. Full termination of parental rights. Voluntary relinquishment. Already signed. William stared at the envelope, understanding its significance. This would remove James's legal standing, permanently clearing the path for potential adoption. It went far beyond simply dropping the custody petition. Why, James stood preparing to leave. Tell Claire I've set up a college fund. Details are in there. He paused, something like regret crossing his features. Tell Hannah, tell her I remember she likes strawberry ice cream. That's something at least. With that, he walked away, leaving William with documents that would fundamentally alter their family's future. The gesture contained both selfishness and selflessness, a recognition of his limitations as a father, alongside a political calculation about cutting losses. The motivation mattered less than the outcome. Hannah was free from the uncertainty that had been hampering her progress. That evening, after Hannah had gone to bed, William shared the news and the documents with Claire. They sat at her kitchen table, legal papers spread between them like a map to an unexpected future. Claire read each page carefully, legal termination transforming into possibility with each paragraph. He just gave up. Claire's disbelief was understandable after months of legal battles. William explained the conversation, James's political calculations, his discomfort with actual fatherhood, his recognition of his own limitations. He's not entirely selfish, just limited. He saw Hannah needed something he couldn't provide. Claire gathered the papers into a neat stack, her expression thoughtful. This changes everything. Legally, I mean. Her eyes met William's, a question in them she wasn't quite ready to verbalize. William nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. Without James's competing claim, the path to formal adoption, should they choose it, had suddenly cleared. The possibility hung between them, significant yet delicate, neither quite ready to name it directly. Later that night, William stood on Claire's balcony, watching late summer stars emerge above the city lights. 10 months had passed since a small girl had approached him on an airplane with an impossible request. 10 months that had transformed everything. Claire joined him, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Her presence beside him felt both extraordinary and utterly natural, the culmination of hundreds of small moments of trust built between them. Hannah wants to build a volcano for her next science project, Claire said, amusement and understanding mingling in her voice. William's breath caught. Of all the science options available, Hannah had chosen the one most significant to his past with Michael, the one he'd missed. Is she doing it on purpose? Do you think she found the photo of Michael with his volcano, Claire admitted. Asked me if you would help her make one too. Said maybe you could build 2 volcanoes this time. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, a child offering healing through a simple science project, tightened William's throat with emotion. Hannah's emotional intelligence continually surprised him, her capacity for compassion extending far beyond her years. I've been thinking, Claire said after a comfortable silence. This apartment is getting crowded with 3 people, and your lease on the penthouse is up next month. William turned to her, hearing the unspoken suggestion. Are you asking me to look for a house with you, Claire Parker? Her smile emerged slowly like sunrise. I'm suggesting we might need more space for this family we're building. The word family hung between them, acknowledging what they had become without either having formally declared it. William took her hand, feeling the steady pulse in her wrist against his fingers. I know a realtor who specializes in homes with good school districts and space for science projects. Fall arrived with crisp changes and new routines. Hannah entered 2nd grade with growing confidence, her selective mutism now manifesting only in unfamiliar group settings rather than the near constant silence of the previous year. The volcano project progressed steadily, with Hannah consulting library books about actual volcanic processes rather than simply recreating the classic baking soda demonstration. William found himself impressed by her scientific rigor, her determination to understand geological principles rather than merely create a visual effect. The night before the science fair, Hannah practiced her explanation for William and Claire, her voice steady as she detailed magma chambers, pressure buildup, and pyroclastic flows. Her command of technical vocabulary showcased both her intelligence and her growing comfort with verbal expression. Was that okay? Did I forget anything important? She asked, looking to William expectantly. You've covered everything perfectly, William assured her, and Michael would be impressed by your attention to detail. The mention of his son, still rare enough to feel significant, brought a smile to Hannah's face. She had developed a curious relationship with the memory of a boy she'd never met, incorporating him into their family narrative with the straightforward acceptance only children seem capable of managing. Do you think he would have liked me? Hannah asked the question, emerging with unexpected vulnerability. William knelt to her, eye-level certainty filling him completely. He would have loved you, Hannah. You're both curious and kind and braver than you realize. Hannah nodded, accepting this assessment with characteristic seriousness. Then we would have been like real family. The statement lingered as Hannah prepared for bed, leaving William and Claire to contemplate its implications. They were functioning as a family in all practical ways, yet the legal and formal acknowledgement remained unspoken between them, a future step neither had yet proposed directly. The morning of the science fair arrived with unexpected complications. William's calendar alert chimed at 6 a.m. with a reminder of a critical investor meeting he'd forgotten to reschedule. The potential funding round for the communication AI platform couldn't be postponed. Representatives were flying in from Tokyo specifically for this discussion. The timing directly conflicted with Hannah's presentation. Claire found him in the kitchen, staring at his phone with evident distress. "What's wrong?" William explained, the conflict frustration evident in his voice. "I can't believe I didn't catch this. The Nakamura group meeting has been scheduled for months." "Hannah will understand," Claire said gently, though her eyes revealed disappointment. "I'll record her presentation." The solution was logical but entirely unsatisfying. William thought of Michael's volcano project, the presentation he had missed for another unmissable meeting. History threatening to repeat itself in the cruelest way. "I need to make a call," he said, stepping onto the balcony with his phone. 20 minutes later, he returned to find Hannah at the breakfast table, carefully reviewing her presentation notes one final time. She looked up as he entered, her expression questioning. "I have a meeting this morning." William began, watching her face carefully for disappointment. "But I've arranged for Thomas to handle the initial discussion. I'll be at your presentation, Hannah. I promise." Hannah's smile bloomed slowly, trust evident in her eyes. "I knew you would be. That's why I made a backup volcano in case something happened to the first one. Not because I thought you wouldn't come." The simple faith in her statement humbled him completely. Hannah had built contingency plans for the project, not for his absence. She expected his presence with a certainty he hadn't earned through his past, but through his consistent choices over these past months. The science fair transformed the school gymnasium into a showcase of elementary ingenuity. Hannah's station drew considerable attention, her volcano model more sophisticated than most of her classmates' projects. The actual demonstration wouldn't occur until the formal presentation time, but her detailed diagrams and geological explanations impressed parents and teachers alike. William arrived 10 minutes before Hannah's scheduled presentation, slightly breathless from having sprinted from the parking lot. Thomas would handle the preliminary discussions with the Nakamura group, though his disapproval had been evident in his terse text. William made his way to Hannah's station, where Claire already waited, phone ready to record the presentation. The judges approached, clipboards poised. Hannah began her explanation with remarkable composure, detailing volcanic formation and behavior with scientific precision. When the moment came for the actual demonstration, she carefully measured baking soda into the chamber, then added the vinegar solution with a steady hand. Nothing happened. Hannah's composure wavered momentarily as she checked the chamber, confirming the ingredients had mixed. Still, the expected eruption failed to materialize. Disappointment flashed across her face as she looked to William, uncertainty replacing her confidence. Without hesitation, William reached into the large bag he'd brought, producing the backup volcano they'd constructed together. "It's all right, Hannah. That's why we prepared." Relief flooded her expression as William quickly set up the second model. Hannah resumed her explanation to the judges. Professional composure restored as she detailed how real volcanoes could experience failed eruptions due to insufficient pressure. When she added the reactants to the backup model, the eruption occurred exactly as planned, an impressive display of lava flowing down the mountainside as Hannah explained pyroclastic flow patterns with uninterrupted enthusiasm. The judges awarded her first place in the physical sciences category. As Hannah accepted her certificate in metal, her smile contained not just pride in the accomplishment, but the deeper satisfaction of a fear overcome. She had faced potential failure, adapted with resilience, and succeeded through preparation and perseverance. Later, as they left the school, Hannah reached for William's hand. "You kept your promise." The simple observation carried profound meaning between them. William squeezed her small hand gently. "I always will, Hannah." That night, after returning to the Nakamura meeting and successfully securing funding for the communication AI platform, William drove to Claire's apartment with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Claire and Hannah had already eaten dinner, but Claire had saved him a plate. Hannah's voice drifted from the bathroom, singing a made-up song about volcanoes and science medals as she brushed her teeth. The Nakamura Group is fully committed, William reported as Claire loaded the dishwasher. Funding secured for the next 3 development phases. Claire nodded, genuine pride in her eyes. I told you it would work out. Both things can matter, William. Work and family. Success doesn't require sacrifice when you choose the right priorities. The wisdom in her statement struck him deeply. For years after the accident, William had functioned with binary thinking: work versus family success versus connection achievement versus presence. Claire's perspective offered integration rather than division, a both-and approach to living that he was only beginning to understand. Hannah appeared in the doorway, pajama-clad and medal-wearing, her smile brightening at the sight of William. Did you win your meeting too? William laughed softly at her framing. Yes, Hannah, I think we all won today. After Hannah's bedtime story and goodnight hugs, William helped Claire finish cleaning the kitchen. They moved together with the synchronized efficiency of partners accustomed to sharing space and responsibilities. You did something remarkable today, Claire said as she dried the last plate. You showed her that promises matter more than perfection. William considered this assessment. 5 years ago, perfection had been his benchmark: flawless execution at work, controlled competence in all things. The accident had shattered that illusion, leaving him clinging to professional success as his sole measure of worth. Today he'd chosen presence over performance, relationship over results. The victory felt more significant than any corporate achievement. I've spent 5 years building walls, William said quietly. You and Hannah taught me how to build a home instead. 2 weeks later, they stood together in the empty living room of a colonial-style house in a tree-lined neighborhood 20 minutes from both the hospital and William's office. Sunlight streamed through bay windows, illuminating hardwood floors that needed refinishing and walls that called for fresh paint. The realtor had stepped outside to give them privacy to discuss. It needs work, Claire acknowledged, running a hand along a doorframe scuffed by previous owners. So did I, William pointed out. You took a chance on me anyway. They wandered through rooms filled with possibility: a formal dining room that could host holiday gatherings, a study perfect for late-night work sessions, 3 bedrooms upstairs, including one with built-in bookshelves that had made Hannah gasp with delight. The backyard featured mature maple trees and space for a garden or play equipment. It wasn't as luxurious as William's penthouse, nor as practical as Claire's apartment, but it felt right, a place where they could build something new together. What do you think? William asked, watching Claire assess the kitchen's outdated countertops. I think, she turned to him, expression serious. I think Hannah will need to change schools if we move here. The if hung between them, a final hesitation before commitment. William moved closer, taking her hands in his. Claire Parker, will you and Hannah allow me the privilege of showing up every day for every volcano experiment, every fever, every triumph, every ordinary Tuesday morning? Will you let me be the father Hannah chose and the partner you deserve? The simplicity of the question, focused on presence rather than possession, brought tears to Claire's eyes. Yes, she whispered, every day, especially the ordinary Tuesdays. Their embrace was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. Does this mean William is staying forever now? They turned to find Hannah watching them, having slipped away from the realtor's supervision. Her expression remained cautious, despite the hope evident in her eyes, still protecting herself against potential disappointment, despite all evidence to the contrary. Claire extended her hand, inviting Hannah into their circle. If that's what you want, Hannah. Hannah approached slowly, considering this proposition with characteristic thoroughness. I think, she said finally, that we should make it official, so everyone knows. William knelt to her eye level, recognizing the importance of this moment. What exactly did you have in mind? Hannah's solution emerged with the pragmatic clarity unique to children. You could adopt me, then you'd be my real dad, not just for pretend or for now, for always. The directness of her proposal, cutting through legal complexities and emotional hesitations to the heart of what mattered, left William momentarily speechless. Claire's hand found his shoulder, steadying him as he navigated this unexpected turn. I would be honored to adopt you, Hannah, William said when he found his voice. If that's what you and your mom decide is right. Hannah's smile bloomed fully, then confidence replacing caution. I already decided a long time ago, on the airplane. The adoption process proved more complex than Hannah's straightforward proposal had suggested. Even with James's relinquishment of parental rights, there were home studies to complete, background checks to process, and court appearances to schedule. William's high profile created additional scrutiny, with officials ensuring the adoption wasn't being rushed or improperly influenced. Through autumn and into winter, they settled into life in the new house. Weekends were devoted to renovation projects, painting bedrooms, refinishing floors, installing updated fixtures. Hannah's room took priority with built-in bookshelves, painted her chosen shade of blue, and a dedicated space for science experiments in one corner. The master bedroom remained Spartan, even as other rooms took shape, as if William and Claire were hesitant to fully claim the space until their family was legally formalized. Hannah's selective mutism continued to improve, with Dr. Chen noting her remarkable progress in therapy sessions. By December, she was speaking in full sentences to nearly everyone in her regular circle: teachers, classmates, even new acquaintances at the grocery store or park. She still occasionally fell silent in overwhelming situations, but these episodes grew shorter and less frequent. The grandfather clock from William's penthouse found a home in the living room, its steady tick marking seconds that no longer felt wasted. Michael's photograph joined family pictures on the mantle, not segregated as a shrine to the past, but integrated into the visual narrative of their evolving family. When Hannah asked questions about Michael, William found himself able to answer without the crushing weight of grief that had once accompanied any mention of his son. January brought their final court date. Judge Winters, who had presided over their custody hearing with James, requested their case specifically. The morning dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant winter blue that seemed to promise new beginnings. Hannah wore her chosen outfit, a blue dress with white collar that she declared official enough for court, but not too fancy for ice cream after. Claire selected a simple cream suit, elegant and understated. William wore the navy sweater he'd chosen for his first visit to Hannah's classroom, a deliberate callback to where their journey had begun. The courtroom felt different this time, not an adversarial arena, but a place of ceremony and transition. A small gathering of supporters waited in the gallery: Dr. Chen, Ms. Abernathy, Nurse Rodriguez, even Thomas Chen, whose initial skepticism had gradually transformed into grudging respect for William's integrated approach to business and family. Judge Winters reviewed the file with thoroughness, occasionally glancing over her reading glasses at Hannah, who sat between William and Claire with uncharacteristic stillness. Finally, the judge set aside her papers and addressed Hannah directly. "Hannah Grace Parker, I see from the reports that you've made remarkable progress since we last met. Your therapist notes that your selective mutism has shown significant improvement." Hannah nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I can talk to almost everybody now, even when I'm nervous." Judge Winters smiled, the judicial reserve softening. "That's wonderful progress, and I understand you've requested this adoption yourself. Can you tell me why that's important to you?" Hannah straightened, her voice clear, despite the formality of the setting. "Because William promised to be my dad forever, and we believe him because he always keeps his promises." The simplicity and certainty of her answer brought an unexpected sheen to the judge's eyes. She turned to William. "Mr. Morgan, raising a child is a lifetime commitment, not a temporary role. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" William met her gaze directly, his answer emerging from the deepest part of himself. "Your Honor, I learned the hard way that life offers no guarantees, but I can promise to show up every day, to put Hannah's well-being above my own, and to love her unconditionally for as long as I live." Judge Winters nodded, then addressed Claire. "Ms. Parker, you've been Hannah's rock through difficult times. How do you feel about sharing that responsibility now?" Claire's hand found William's on the table between them. "I've discovered that sharing the weight doesn't make my role less important. It makes our family stronger. William has earned his place in our lives. We're better together." Judge Winters reviewed the final paperwork, then looked up with a warm smile. "Based on all evidence and recommendations, I find this adoption to be in the best interest of the child. From this day forward, Hannah Grace Parker will legally be known as Hannah Grace Morgan Parker, with William Morgan recognized as her father in all legal and personal matters." She handed William a certificate with Hannah's new name emblazoned across the top. "Congratulations to your family." Outside on the courthouse steps, Hannah skipped slightly ahead, adoption certificate clutched carefully in her hands. The January sun cast long shadows across the stone steps, but the air felt warmer, somehow filled with possibility. "Can we get ice cream?" Hannah asked, practical concerns asserting themselves now that the formalities were complete. "Strawberry to celebrate." William nodded, remembering James's parting message, the one memory he had managed to retain of his daughter. Strawberry sounds perfect. That evening, after celebration and ice cream and well wishes from friends, the three of them returned home. The house felt different somehow, more settled, more completely theirs. Hannah disappeared into her room, returning moments later with a gift-wrapped package that she presented to William with ceremonial solemnity. I made this for today, she explained. Mom helped with the binding. William unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a handmade book, its cover decorated with photographs and drawings, title written in Hannah's careful handwriting, My Family is Real. Inside, page by page, Hannah had documented their journey from the airplane meeting to Daddy Day, from hospital visits to court hearings, from science projects to quiet evenings at home. The final page showed a drawing of their new house with three figures standing before it, no longer labeled for a little while, but simply home. As William turned to the last page, he found a photograph. He didn't recognize Michael at his science fair, standing proudly beside his volcano. Beneath it, Hannah had written in careful letters, "Thank you for sending your dad to us." The unexpected connection, Hannah's innate understanding that Michael somehow remained part of their story, broke through William's last emotional defenses. Tears filled his eyes as he gathered Hannah into a gentle embrace. "Thank you for choosing me," he whispered. That first day and every day since. Hannah's arms wrapped around his neck with complete trust. "I knew you'd be a good dude, even if it was just for one day." Later that night, after Hannah had fallen asleep, William and Claire stood in the doorway of her room, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her breathing. The nightlight cast soft patterns across walls decorated with science awards, family photographs, and carefully preserved drawings. On her desk sat two volcano models side by side, one from her recent science fair, one smaller and older, recovered from William's storage. Michael's original project now stood beside Hannah's, a visual representation of past and present united. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she hadn't approached you that day?" Claire asked softly, leaning against his shoulder. William considered the question, his arm tightening slightly around her waist. "I think she would have found me anyway. Some connections are inevitable." In the living room, the grandfather clock chimed softly, marking the hour. On the mantel, photographs chronicled their evolving family, Michael flying a kite, Hannah with her science fair medal, Claire and William on their wedding day 3 months earlier. The past and present no longer segregated, but woven together into a continuous narrative. Outside the window, city lights glimmered against the winter darkness. Inside, the quiet rhythms of family life continued. Hannah's backpack, ready for morning science project materials, organized on the dining table calendar, marked with upcoming doctor appointments and school events. Nothing dramatic or extraordinary, yet everything William had once believed beyond his reach. William drew Claire into his arms, the gratitude he felt too profound for words. Together they stood in the home they had built, not of walls and windows, but of promises kept and love freely given. In the quiet of that moment, William understood the simple truth that had eluded him for so long. Sometimes love isn't loud, it simply shows up.